Lucas and Henry were brothers who loved exploring the mountains together. Ever since they were young, they had shared a passion for hiking and discovering hidden trails. Today, they had decided to try a path neither of them had ever walked before. The sun was bright in the morning sky, and the forest was alive with the sounds of chirping birds, rustling leaves, and distant waterfalls. Lucas adjusted his backpack and looked at his brother with a smile. "Ready for a long day?" he asked. Henry nodded, tightening the straps on his boots. "Absolutely. Let's see what this trail has for us." The brothers started walking along a narrow path that wound between tall pine trees and moss-covered rocks. The air was fresh and smelled of wet earth from last night's rain. Small streams trickled down the mountain, reflecting the sunlight like ribbons of silver. Every few minutes they stopped to admire the view or take pictures with their small camera. The forest felt like a secret world, untouched and peaceful. As they climbed higher, Lucas noticed that the sky was changing. The soft blue of morning had shifted to a pale gray. He pointed upward. "Look at those clouds. They're moving fast." Henry followed his gaze and frowned. "It looks like a storm might be coming. But we are still fine for now. Let's keep going. We can always turn back if it gets worse." For a while, the brothers continued along the trail, enjoying the crisp mountain air and the quiet hum of nature. The path became steeper, and the trees grew denser, creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into soft patterns on the ground. Lucas and Henry shared stories and laughed at small jokes, trying to ignore the faint rumble of distant thunder. By noon, the first drops of rain began to fall. The soft pitter-patter on leaves sounded peaceful at first, but soon it grew heavier. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of wet soil and pine needles. Lucas pulled his jacket closer around him. "We should find shelter," he suggested. Henry looked at the sky. The clouds were dark and heavy, and the rain was coming down faster now. "You're right. Let's find somewhere safe before it gets worse." They hurried along the trail, their boots slipping slightly on the wet stones. The forest around them seemed to change as the storm approached. Shadows stretched longer, and the trees swayed in the growing wind. Thunder rumbled louder, echoing through the mountains. After a few minutes of searching, they spotted something unusual through the trees. A small wooden cabin stood half hidden among tall pines. Its roof was covered in moss, and the windows were clouded with dirt. The cabin looked old, almost forgotten, but at that moment it seemed like a perfect refuge from the storm. Lucas pointed. "Look, there's a cabin. Maybe we can stay there until the rain stops." Henry nodded and led the way. They ran through the rain, their clothes soaked and their hair plastered to their heads. The cabin door was old and creaked loudly as Lucas pushed it open. The inside smelled of damp wood and dust. The room was dim, but they could make out some details. There was an old fireplace with ashes inside, a broken table with chairs around it, and shelves filled with objects covered in cobwebs. A thick layer of dust suggested that no one had been there for a long time. "This place looks abandoned," Lucas whispered, glancing around nervously. Henry shrugged. "Maybe, but it's dry. We can wait out the storm here." The brothers set their backpacks down and explored the room. The furniture was worn and the floorboards creaked under their weight. Henry moved toward a window, wiping away the dirt to see outside. Rain fell in sheets and the trees bent with the wind. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a loud roll of thunder that shook the cabin slightly. Lucas shivered, not only because of the cold, but also because of a strange feeling in the cabin. Something about it felt unusual, almost as if the place had a life of its own. He tried to shake off the thought. "It's just old and empty," he said to himself. Henry walked over to the fireplace and looked inside. The ashes were gray and dry, but there were faint marks like someone had used the fireplace recently. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the ashes. "It's strange. This looks like someone has been here not too long ago." Lucas nodded slowly. "Maybe, but we should not worry. Let's just stay dry and safe until the storm passes." The rain continued to fall, hitting the roof with increasing force. The brothers decided to sit near the fireplace, trying to feel some warmth. Henry opened his backpack and pulled out a small snack, handing one to Lucas. They ate quietly, listening to the storm outside. Minutes turned into an hour, and the forest outside grew darker as the afternoon progressed. The thunder sounded closer, and occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the cabin. The brothers began to notice small details inside the room that had escaped their attention earlier. On the shelves there were jars filled with dried plants and herbs. Old books with yellowed pages were stacked in piles. A faded painting hung on one wall, showing a man with intense eyes staring directly at anyone who looked at it. Henry stared at the painting for a long moment. "It's a little creepy, don't you think?" he asked. Lucas nodded but didn't look at it directly. "It's just a painting. Probably no one has lived here for years." Despite trying to stay calm, both brothers felt a strange chill in the air. The storm outside seemed louder than before, but it was not only the storm that made them uneasy. Something about the cabin felt strange, almost alive. Suddenly, a loud noise came from the back of the cabin like something heavy had fallen. Lucas and Henry froze. The sound echoed in the room, making their hearts race. "Maybe it's just the wind knocking something over," Lucas said, trying to sound confident. Henry shook his head. It didn't sound like the wind. That was too deliberate. They slowly moved toward the source of the noise. The back of the cabin had a narrow staircase leading downward. The steps were dark, and a faint draft of cold air came from below. Henry peered into the darkness. "Do we want to go down there?" Lucas asked nervously. Henry hesitated, but curiosity got the better of him. "I think we need to see what's there. Maybe it will explain the noise." Lucas sighed but followed his brother. They held the lantern high as they stepped onto the stairs. The air grew colder with each step, and the wooden boards creaked under their weight. The basement below was dark and mysterious. Shadows danced along the walls in the lantern light. At the bottom, they saw a small room filled with old furniture. In the center, there was a large trunk covered in dust. The brothers approached slowly. The trunk had scratches on it as if someone had tried to open it before. Henry knelt down and examined it. "This hasn't been opened in years," he whispered. Lucas noticed strange symbols carved into the floor around the trunk. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" he asked. Henry shook his head. "Never. It looks like something from an old story." A sudden gust of wind blew through a small window, scattering papers across the basement floor. Among them were sketches of strange animals, some with eyes that seemed almost alive. There were also maps marking areas around the mountains with notes like "They watch" and "Do not go alone." The brothers looked at each other, their faces pale. The cabin was no longer just an old building in the forest. It held secrets, and the storm outside had brought them here. They felt a mix of fear and curiosity. Lucas said quietly, "Maybe we should go back upstairs. This is more than we expected." Henry nodded, but he couldn't take his eyes off the strange papers. Something about the basement called to him, making him wonder what had happened in this abandoned place. The brothers climbed back up slowly, careful not to disturb the shadows that seemed to linger in every corner. When they reached the main room, they felt a strange relief, but the sense of unease did not leave them. The storm outside began to ease slightly, but the cabin remained silent, almost watching them. Lucas and Henry decided to wait until the rain stopped completely. They sat near the fireplace again, but their thoughts kept drifting back to the basement. The storm had brought them here, but they knew deep down that the cabin was more than just a shelter. As the evening grew darker, the forest outside quieted. The brothers could hear only the soft drip of water from the roof and the occasional rustle of leaves. Inside, the cabin seemed to hold its breath as if waiting for them to discover its secrets. Lucas glanced at Henry. "Tomorrow we explore more, but for now we stay here." "We need rest." Henry nodded, though sleep felt far away. The storm had passed, but the cabin had opened a door to mysteries neither brother could yet understand. The night stretched on, and the brothers remained in the old cabin, listening to the quiet forest. Somewhere deep within the walls, it felt as if something had moved, waiting for them to take the next step. The next morning, Lucas woke to the sound of birds chirping outside the cabin. The storm had passed, leaving the forest sparkling with raindrops on every leaf. Sunlight filtered through the tall pine trees, creating a golden glow on the mossy ground. Lucas shook Henry gently. "Henry, wake up. It's morning," he whispered. Henry opened his eyes slowly and rubbed his face. "Morning already?" "I slept strangely. I kept hearing noises in the cabin last night," he said. Lucas nodded. "I felt the same. It's like the cabin itself was alive, but maybe it's just the wind, or our imagination." After a quick breakfast of granola bars and water from their backpacks, the brothers decided to explore the cabin more thoroughly. Yesterday, they had only glanced at the main room in the basement. Today, they wanted to understand what kind of place they had stumbled upon. Henry grabbed the lantern, still feeling a strange pull toward the old objects in the cabin. Lucas followed, trying to shake off the unease. The shelves along the walls held many items. There were jars filled with dried plants, some with odd shapes, others with bright colors that had faded with time. Old books with brittle pages rested in stacks. Some had titles written in languages neither brother recognized. Henry opened one of the books carefully. The pages were full of notes about plants, animals, and strange events in the forest. Some pages had drawings of creatures that looked half human, half animal, hiding in the shadows. Lucas frowned. This is unusual. It looks like someone studied the forest very closely, but why these strange drawings? Henry pointed to a corner of the room. Look at this pile. These are more papers, and they seem to be maps. Lucas walked over. The maps showed paths through the mountains, marking certain areas with circles and notes like, "Do not stay after dark," and "They watch closely." The handwriting was old, but clear. Some of the symbols matched the carvings they had seen on the basement floor. A sudden sound made both brothers jump. It was a soft scraping noise coming from the back of the cabin. Lucas gripped a chair to steady himself while Henry held the lantern higher. "Someone's here," Henry whispered. Lucas shook his head. "I don't think so. This cabin has been empty for years. Maybe an animal or a branch outside made the noise." They slowly approached the staircase that led to the basement. The air felt colder the closer they got. Henry's hand trembled slightly as he opened the door. Lucas whispered, "We should be careful. We don't know what's down there." Together they descended the stairs again. The basement was dark, with shadows stretching across the walls. The trunk from yesterday still rested in the center, now closed. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by their movements. Henry knelt in front of the trunk. It's still locked. But look at these marks around it. Someone tried to open it many times. Lucas pointed to the floor. And these carvings, they are everywhere. They must mean something. Henry picked up a fallen piece of paper. It had a drawing of the trunk with notes in the margins. The notes mentioned the forest and creatures that could watch humans from a distance. The sketches were detailed, showing eyes in the trees and shadows moving at night. A sudden movement at the edge of the room made the brothers freeze. A small shadow darted across the wall. Neither spoke. They waited, listening to their own breathing. Henry whispered, "Do you see it? Something is moving here. Maybe it's alive." Lucas shook his head slowly. "We need to be calm. Maybe it's just a trick of the light from the lantern." Despite their attempts to stay calm, the basement felt strange and almost alive. Every corner seemed darker than it should be. Every shadow appeared to move slightly as if observing them. Henry carefully opened the trunk. Inside they found wooden carvings shaped like animals. Some resembled foxes, owls, or deer. But their eyes were painted black and they seemed to stare directly at the brothers. The carvings were old but detailed, as if someone had spent years creating them. Lucas whispered, "These aren't just toys. Someone made these with care, and the eyes. It feels like they are watching us." Henry nodded. "We need to understand why. There is more to this cabin than we thought." Suddenly, a cold breeze blew through the small basement window, scattering papers everywhere. The brothers scrambled to pick them up. The new papers showed more drawings of the forest, strange symbols carved into trees, and notes warning about shapes that move at night and never enter alone. Lucas shivered. The person who wrote these notes must have been afraid of something. Henry's eyes widened. Or maybe they saw what we just saw. The carvings, the symbols, the cabin itself might be part of it. As they examined the papers, a soft creak echoed above them. The brothers froze listening. The sound was deliberate, like someone stepping carefully across the old wooden floor. Lucas whispered, "We are not alone in this cabin." Henry's voice was quiet. "I think you are right. But should we leave? Or find out more?" Lucas swallowed hard. "I think we should leave the basement for now. There is too much here to understand and the air feels wrong." The brothers climbed the stairs back to the main room. They felt relief when the familiar fireplace came into view. The light from the lantern flickered as they set it down, revealing more details of the room. Henry looked at the painting again. The man's eyes seemed to follow them, unblinking. Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine. "We need to stay calm. It's just a painting," he said, though his voice lacked confidence. They decided to search the rest of the cabin. A narrow hallway led to a small room that might have been a bedroom. The bed was covered in a thick layer of dust and the floor was littered with broken furniture. Lucas picked up a small wooden box from the corner. Inside were more carvings, this time smaller, shaped like tiny birds and rabbits. Henry noticed something carved into the wall above the bed. It was a symbol, the same as the ones on the basement floor. These symbols are everywhere. Why would someone carve them here and in the basement? He asked. Lucas shook his head. I don't know. But it is clear that whoever lived here believed in something very strongly. Something that might still be in this cabin. The brothers sat for a moment thinking about what they had found. The storm from yesterday had led them to this place, but now the cabin itself felt alive. The carvings, the symbols, and the drawings suggested a story they could not yet understand. Suddenly the floor creaked above them. Both brothers froze. It was not the wind this time. Something was moving on the second floor. Lucas whispered, "We need to see what it is." Henry shook his head slightly. "Are you sure? We do not know what we will find. Maybe it is better to wait." Lucas nodded slowly. "You are right. We should be careful. But curiosity, it will not let me stay still." They waited in silence, listening. The soft sounds continued as if someone or something was walking slowly across the floor. The brothers felt the weight of the cabin around them, as if it were holding its breath. Every shadow seemed to stretch and move. Henry whispered, "This place is full of secrets." "I feel like we are only seeing a part of it," Lucas agreed. "And the more we see, the more we understand that it is not just a cabin. There is something here, waiting, watching us." The brothers decided to stay calm and gather their courage. They knew that whatever lay ahead in the cabin, they had to face it together. Henry picked up the lantern and Lucas held the carved wooden box he had found. Slowly they began to explore the cabin again, determined to understand its mysteries. Every step they took, every creak of the floor, reminded them that this was no ordinary cabin. It held stories, secrets, and perhaps even dangers that no one should ever disturb. The sun climbed higher in the sky, shining through the windows, but the cabin remained dim and full of shadows. Lucas and Henry knew that this day would not end without them uncovering more than they expected. As they moved carefully through the rooms, their minds were alert, their senses heightened. Every sound, every movement seemed to hint at something hidden. The cabin had revealed a part of itself, but it was clear there was much more to discover. Lucas glanced at Henry. "We are in for a long day, but we have to see this through. The cabin has secrets, and I think we are meant to find them." Henry nodded, gripping the lantern tightly. "I hope we are ready for whatever comes next." With that, the brothers continued their search, unaware that the cabin had already begun to show them what it wanted them to see. The day was just beginning, and the mysteries of the storm-swept cabin were far from over. After exploring the main rooms of the cabin, Lucas and Henry decided to return to the basement. The wooden stairs creaked under their weight as they descended slowly, the lantern flickering slightly with every step. The air grew colder, and a faint smell of old wood and earth filled their noses. The basement had an almost silent presence, as if it was holding its breath. Lucas held the lantern high while Henry carefully moved aside fallen papers and broken furniture. The trunk that had captured their attention yesterday was still in the center of the room. Its old wooden surface was scratched and worn, suggesting years of use. The carvings on the floor glowed faintly in the lantern light, their strange symbols more mysterious than ever. Henry knelt beside the trunk, brushing dust from the top. "I wonder what is inside. It looks important." Lucas nodded but kept his eyes on the shadows along the walls. "Be careful. We don't know what we are about to see." Henry tried the trunk's latch. It moved slightly but remained locked. It stuck. "Someone tried to open it before, but they didn't succeed," he said. Lucas leaned closer. "Look at the carvings on the floor. They surround the trunk perfectly. It feels like they were meant to protect it or maybe warn people." Henry frowned. "I have a feeling the person who lived here believed in something strong. Something about the forest and its creatures. Maybe the trunk holds a clue." Lucas looked around. The basement walls were lined with more shelves, each filled with jars, old books, and small wooden carvings. The carvings were shaped like animals, foxes, birds, deer, but their painted eyes seemed unusually alive. It was as if they were watching every movement the brothers made. Henry picked up one carving, a small fox with black eyes. He turned it over in his hands. "These are too detailed to be ordinary toys. Someone made them carefully. They must mean something." Lucas nodded. "Or someone wanted to watch over the cabin. Maybe these carvings are part of a story or a warning." Suddenly, a cold breeze blew through a small basement window. Papers scattered across the floor. some landing near the trunk. Henry picked up a sheet. It was a drawing of the trunk surrounded by forest animals, some half real, half imagined. The notes along the edges mentioned strange creatures that lived unseen in the mountains and shadows that followed humans at night. Lucas shivered. It's like the cabin itself is telling a story. Someone wanted to record everything that happened here. Henry nodded, and maybe they left clues. These carvings, the maps, the notes, they are all connected. But to what? A soft creak above them made both brothers freeze. It sounded like footsteps, deliberate and careful. Lucas held a chair in front of him, and Henry raised the lantern. They waited silently, listening. The footsteps stopped after a few seconds. The basement felt heavier, colder, and full of tension. Lucas whispered, "We are not alone. Something is still here." Henry's voice was low. "Yes, but it is not trying to hurt us. It feels like it wants to show us something. Maybe the cabin itself is alive in some way." The brothers carefully examined the trunk again. Lucas noticed that the carvings on the floor formed a pattern, almost like a map. Following the symbols with his eyes, he realized they led to a section of the wall. He tapped on the wall where the pattern ended, and a small panel creaked open. Henry gasped. "Look, there is a hidden space inside the wall." Lucas reached inside. His hand brushed against old papers in a small wooden box. He pulled them out carefully. Inside the box were several items: a tiny carved key, some folded maps, and a notebook with notes written in neat handwriting. Henry opened the notebook. The pages described the forest in great detail, the animals, the seasons, and strange events that had happened over many years. The writer spoke of shadows that appeared at night and creatures that watched from the trees. Some pages had sketches of the carvings they had seen, each labeled with a name and description. Lucas whispered, "This explains the carvings. They are records, maybe even guides to protect the cabin and the forest." Henry nodded. "But why leave it all hidden? And why the warnings?" Whoever wrote this wanted people to know, but also to fear. The brothers studied the maps carefully. One of them showed the cabin in relation to the surrounding mountains. Certain areas were marked with symbols they had seen carved in the basement. These spots were labeled with notes like, "Do not enter at night," "They watch silently," and "Follow the path carefully." Lucas traced one of the paths with his finger. "These are trails in the forest. Some might be safe, but others are not. Whoever lived here knew things we don't yet understand." Henry added quietly, "Maybe that's why the cabin felt alive. It was a warning, a guide, and a record all at once." The brothers heard a soft shuffle behind them. Both turned quickly but saw nothing. Only the shadows moved slightly in the corners of the basement. Henry held the lantern higher, trying to illuminate every dark space. Lucas whispered, "We have to remember that these carvings and maps are not just objects. They might have power or at least influence the forest somehow." Henry agreed. "We need to study them carefully. Every symbol, every drawing. It could be important." They examined the items in the box further. The key was small and intricate. Henry turned it over. This must open something in the cabin. Maybe the trunk, maybe another secret room. Whoever left this wanted someone to find it eventually. Lucas looked around. "We should be cautious. The cabin has already surprised us more than once. It might have more secrets we are not ready for." The brothers carefully returned the items to the trunk, leaving it partially open to remind them of the discoveries. They walked slowly toward the stairs, feeling the weight of the basement's strange atmosphere. Every shadow seemed longer, every corner darker. Back upstairs, the cabin felt warmer, but the sense of mystery remained. The carvings and maps were not just objects. They were part of a story, part of the forest, and part of the cabin itself. The brothers realized that they had only seen a small piece of what was hidden in this old house. Lucas walked to the window. The forest outside was calm. The rain from yesterday had left the air fresh and sparkling, yet the cabin's secrets remained inside, waiting to be uncovered. Henry sat on a broken chair, flipping through some old papers they had brought up from the basement. "This place is incredible. Whoever lived here must have had a strong connection to the forest and everything in it." Lucas nodded. "Yes, and we have to respect that. The cabin is showing us its secrets carefully, and we must be careful too." The brothers spent the rest of the afternoon studying what they had found. The drawings, maps, and carvings revealed a story about a person who understood the forest deeply. They had recorded every unusual event, every creature they had seen and every mysterious occurrence. Henry looked at the carvings in the main room. Each one is like a key, a symbol. The person wanted future visitors to see them and maybe understand the forest in a new way. Lucas agreed. And the basement was the heart of it all. The trunk, the carvings, the symbols. It held everything important. As evening approached, the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the forest. The cabin seemed quieter now, but the brothers knew the secrets were still there, waiting to be explored further. Lucas and Henry sat by the fireplace, thinking about what they had learned. The storm had led them to this cabin, but the cabin itself was a guide, a warning, and a story waiting to be told. Henry whispered, "Tomorrow, we need to explore more. I feel like the cabin has more to show us, and we need to understand it fully." Lucas nodded. "Yes, but we must be careful. This place is full of mysteries, and we are only beginning to uncover them." The brothers felt a strange excitement mixed with fear. The cabin was more than it seemed, and the forest surrounding it held secrets that had been waiting for someone to discover them. As night fell, the lanterns flickered, shadows stretched across the walls, and the cabin seemed to breathe around them. Lucas and Henry knew that they were part of a story that had started long before them and would continue long after. They sat quietly, listening to the soft sounds of the forest outside. Somewhere deep within the cabin, the secrets of the basement waited, ready to reveal the next piece of the puzzle to those brave enough to continue exploring. The next morning, Lucas and Henry woke to a soft light spilling through the cabin windows. The forest outside was quiet and peaceful, but the cabin still felt charged with secrets. The previous day's discoveries lingered in their minds, making every creak of the floor and flicker of the lantern feel significant. Lucas stretched and looked at his brother. "We need to explore the rest of the cabin today. I feel like there is more we have not seen yet." Henry nodded, still holding the small carved fox from the basement. "I agree. Yesterday we saw only part of the story. There is more here, waiting for us." They gathered their lanterns and moved carefully through the main room, checking every shelf, every corner, and every object. The carvings on the shelves seemed almost to watch them, and the paintings on the walls gave the feeling that someone was looking at them from the past. Lucas picked up an old book from the top shelf. The cover was worn, but the pages were filled with notes about weather patterns, plants, and animals in the forest. There were also drawings of strange lights that appeared at night, along the trails marked on the maps from the basement. Henry pointed to a corner near the fireplace. "Look at these footprints. They weren't here yesterday." Lucas looked closely. Small, shallow marks led across the wooden floor toward the back of the cabin. "Someone or something has been moving around," he whispered. Suddenly, a shadow passed quickly across the room. Both brothers froze. The shadow seemed human-shaped, but it moved in an unusual way, smooth and quiet, like it was gliding. Henry held the lantern high. "Did you see that?" he asked. Lucas nodded, gripping a chair for balance. "Yes, it's not an animal. It looks like a person, or maybe something else." The shadow stopped near the doorway to the basement, pointing with a long finger toward the stairs. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "It wants us to go down again," he whispered. Henry swallowed hard. "Do we have to? We barely understand what we saw yesterday." Lucas hesitated. The curiosity that had driven them to the cabin was now mixed with fear. "We do. I think the cabin is showing us something and we need to see it, but we must be careful." Together the brothers descended the stairs slowly. The basement felt colder than before. Shadows stretched along the walls, and the carvings on the floor glimmered faintly in the lantern light. The trunk remained in the center, open slightly as if inviting them closer. Henry moved forward first, examining the wooden carvings again. The animal's eyes seemed almost alive in the lantern light. He picked up the small rabbit carving and turned it in his hands. "These are so detailed. It's like they were made to watch everything that happens here." Lucas noticed something unusual near the back wall. A narrow panel was slightly ajar. He pointed to it. "Look at that. The panel wasn't open yesterday. Maybe it hides something important." Henry nodded. "Let's check it carefully." Lucas reached inside the panel and found a small wooden box. Inside were more carvings, tiny and intricate, each painted with black eyes and strange symbols. There was also a folded piece of parchment. Henry unfolded it and discovered it was a map of the forest with paths marked that were not on the other maps they had seen. These paths are unusual, Henry said. Some lead to places deep in the forest. Others are crossed out with symbols similar to the carvings. Whoever made this wanted to show safe paths and dangerous ones. Lucas traced a path with his finger. I think this is why the cabin feels alive. The person who lived here left instructions, guides, and warnings. It's like the cabin itself is a teacher. Suddenly the lantern flickered violently. The shadow appeared again, closer this time. It did not move toward them aggressively. Instead, it pointed to the trunk and then toward the small panel in the wall. Henry whispered, "It's showing us something. Maybe it wants us to find more clues." Lucas nodded slowly. "We need to follow it, but carefully. Let's see what it wants to show us." They returned to the trunk and examined its contents once more. The notebooks, carvings, and papers suggested that whoever lived here had an extraordinary knowledge of the forest. Some pages described natural events, strange animals, and shadows that moved in unusual ways. The maps marked safe and unsafe areas. The carvings, Lucas realized, were not just decorations. They were symbols, records, and warnings. The shadow moved closer to the corner of the basement. There, hidden behind some old furniture, was a small trapdoor in the floor. Lucas knelt down and examined it. "This wasn't here before, or we never noticed it." "The shadow wants us to open it." Henry hesitated. "Do we know what's down there?" Lucas shook his head. "No, but the cabin is guiding us. We have to trust it, carefully." Together they lifted the trapdoor. A dark staircase led downward. The air that rose from below was colder and smelled like wet earth. The lanterns illuminated the steps, revealing ancient carvings along the walls. Lucas and Henry exchanged nervous glances. "Are we really doing this?" Henry whispered. Lucas nodded. "We have to. This is part of what the cabin wants us to discover." They descended slowly, feeling the tension grow with every step. At the bottom, they found a small underground room. It was filled with even more carvings, wooden figures, and old journals. Every surface was covered with symbols that matched those in the basement and on the floors above. Henry picked up a carving of a bird. "These are incredible. Whoever made them must have spent years working here." "It's like a whole world hidden in this cabin," Lucas nodded. "And the shadow, I think it is not dangerous. It is helping us understand, showing us what is important." They explored the room carefully. The journals described nights in the forest, strange lights, unusual animals, and events that no one else could see. Each entry included sketches of the carvings and symbols that now surrounded the brothers. Henry looked at Lucas. "This is amazing. The cabin is like a library of the forest, full of secrets and knowledge, but it also feels like someone wanted to make sure only the right people could see it." Lucas agreed. "And that might be us. The cabin chose us by letting us find it during the storm. That's why everything here feels alive." Suddenly, the shadow appeared again, hovering near the center of the room. It did not speak, but it gestured toward one of the journals. Henry opened it and found a map with symbols marking locations where the carvings and notes had originated. "This is incredible," Henry said. "The maps tell a story, show paths, and warn about dangers in the forest. Whoever made these carvings and journals understood this forest like no one else." Lucas looked at the shadow. "It's like it wants us to continue the story, to learn from it and maybe protect the forest too." Henry nodded slowly. "And we have to be careful. The cabin has secrets and it can guide us, but we have to respect it." They spent hours studying the underground room. Every carving, every symbol, and every journal page revealed more about the mysterious person who had lived here. The forest, the cabin, and the carvings were connected, forming a story that the brothers had only begun to understand. As evening approached, the shadow retreated slowly toward the stairs. The brothers realized it had done its job for now. It had guided them to the most important part of the cabin and allowed them to see its heart. Lucas whispered, "We need to rest. Tomorrow we continue. There is more to learn, and I feel like the cabin will show us even more secrets." Henry agreed. "We have already seen so much, but I feel like the story is only beginning. There is more to discover and we have to be ready." The brothers climbed back to the main room, feeling a mix of awe and respect for the cabin. The shadows were long, the lanterns flickered, but the sense of mystery remained. The storm had brought them here. The cabin had guided them, and now the forest itself seemed to whisper stories from the past. Lucas and Henry sat near the fireplace, reviewing what they had found. They knew that the cabin was not ordinary. It held knowledge, warnings, and history. They also understood that the shadow, whatever it was a guardian of these secrets. As night fell outside, the brothers listened to the soft sounds of the forest. The cabin felt alive around them, watching, waiting, and ready to reveal more when the time was right. Lucas looked at Henry. "Tomorrow we will uncover more." "I can feel it," Henry nodded. "And we have to be ready. This cabin is showing us things no one else has seen. We are part of its story now." With that, the brothers settled near the fireplace, their minds racing with the discoveries of the day. The cabin had revealed its underground secret, but the mysteries were far from over. Somewhere in the shadows, the forest and the cabin held more stories, waiting for the next step. The morning sun streamed into the cabin, painting the walls with golden light. Lucas and Henry felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. They had explored the basement, discovered hidden rooms, and followed the shadow's guidance. Now they sensed that the cabin had one final secret to reveal. Lucas adjusted his backpack and looked at his brother. "Today we find the rest of the story. I can feel it. There is something important waiting for us," Henry nodded. "Yes, but we must be careful. The cabin has tested us already. We need to pay attention to everything, every symbol, and every shadow." They gathered their lanterns and moved cautiously through the main room. The carvings and symbols seemed to watch them as they passed, as if encouraging them to continue. The paintings on the walls felt alive, their eyes following the brothers' movements, giving the feeling that the cabin itself was aware of their presence. Lucas pointed toward a door at the far end of the room. "We haven't opened that one yet. Maybe it leads to the last part of the cabin." Henry's eyes widened. "It looks ordinary, but with everything we have seen, I wouldn't be surprised if it hides something important." They pushed the door open slowly. Beyond it was a narrow hallway leading to another small room. The air was colder here, and the floorboards creaked beneath their weight. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, similar to those in the basement and the small underground room. Henry held the lantern high. "This room feels different. It is quiet, but the air feels heavy, like it is waiting for us." Lucas nodded. "Exactly. I think the cabin is showing us its final secret. We just have to find it." In the center of the room, covered by an old dusty cloth, was a large chest. It looked ancient, with carvings that matched the symbols throughout the cabin. The brothers approached it slowly. Lucas lifted the cloth carefully, revealing the chest's surface. Henry examined the carvings. "These symbols are similar to the ones we saw in the basement and underground. They must mean something important." Lucas touched the chest's latch. The small carved key from the hidden panel in the basement fit perfectly. With a soft click, the chest opened. Inside were items unlike anything they had seen before. There were more wooden carvings, each carefully painted with eyes that seemed alive. There were old journals filled with notes about the forest, unusual animals, and shadows that moved during the night. Some pages described strange events like lights appearing in the forest and trails that changed overnight. Henry picked up one journal and read aloud. "It says that whoever discovers these secrets will understand the forest in a new way. They will see what is hidden, respect it, and protect it." Lucas nodded slowly. "The cabin has guided us to this point. It chose us to see these things and understand the forest. That must be its purpose." Suddenly, the shadow appeared again. This time it moved closer but did not speak or threaten. It gestured toward the chest and then toward the door leading outside. Lucas and Henry realized that the cabin had finished revealing its secrets. Henry whispered, "It's like the cabin is telling us it's time to leave. We have seen everything it wanted us to see." Lucas agreed. "Yes, but we must remember everything. These carvings, journals, and maps, they are knowledge we need to respect." The brothers gathered the key, journals, and a few carvings to take with them. They left the chest as it was, understanding that the cabin itself held more secrets that were not meant to be disturbed. The shadow moved ahead of them, guiding them toward the front door. Outside, the forest looked calm. The storm had long passed and sunlight reflected off leaves and streams. The cabin appeared smaller and ordinary now, but the brothers knew it was anything but ordinary. It had life, purpose, and a story that only a few could understand. Lucas and Henry walked carefully down the trail, leaving the cabin behind. The forest felt different now, quieter yet full of unseen life. They noticed small movements in the trees, the rustle of leaves and distant calls of animals. It was as if the forest was alive in a way they had never realized before. Henry looked back. "Do you think we will ever understand everything about that cabin?" Lucas shook his head. maybe not everything. But we understand enough. We know it is special and we have to respect its secrets. They continued down the trail, their backpacks carrying the small items from the cabin. Every step was filled with a sense of wonder, curiosity, and respect. The forest seemed to guide them, showing that it was alive and connected to the mysterious cabin they had discovered. As they walked, Lucas and Henry reflected on their journey. The storm had led them to the cabin. The cabin had guided them through its rooms, symbols, and carvings. They had followed the shadow, understood the maps, and uncovered secrets of the forest that no one else knew. Henry smiled slightly. I never thought a simple hike could turn into something like this. It feels like we have discovered a hidden world. Lucas nodded. It is more than a hidden world. It is a story, a history, and a guide. The person who lived there wanted someone to learn and protect the forest. And I think we were meant to find it. As the trail descended toward the open valley, the cabin disappeared from view, hidden among the tall pines. Yet the memory of its strange power, the shadow, and the carving stayed with them. Every sound of the forest reminded them that the cabin story was still alive. Henry paused. Do you think anyone else will ever find that cabin? Lucas thought for a moment. Maybe, but only if the cabin wants them to. It seems to choose who sees it and when. That's why it guided us and why we understood its secrets. The brothers reached the edge of the forest where the mountains opened into a wide, sunlit valley. They felt a sense of relief, excitement, and awe all at once. The storm, the cabin, and the shadow had shown them a side of the world they had never imagined. Lucas turned to Henry. We need to promise each other something. We must respect the cabin, its secrets, and the forest. We cannot tell everyone what we saw or it might lose its power. Henry nodded. I agree. It is a special place and we were lucky to see it. We will protect its secrets and remember what it taught us. The brothers continued down the trail, the forest behind them full of life and mystery. Every step felt lighter, but the sense of wonder remained. They had faced fear, curiosity, and the unknown, and now they carried knowledge that few could ever imagine. As they reached the valley, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. Lucas and Henry paused, looking back toward the mountains. The cabin was hidden now, surrounded by trees, shadows, and mystery. Yet they knew it was alive, waiting and watching. Lucas smiled. We will never forget this place. It changed us, taught us, and showed us what the forest can be. Henry agreed. And someday we will return, not to disturb it, but to honor it. To remember its story and the lessons it gave us. With that, the brothers walked into the valley, leaving the hidden cabin and the shadow behind. The forest was quiet yet alive, filled with secrets, stories, and the knowledge that some mysteries were meant to be discovered carefully and respected fully. The storm had led them to the cabin. The cabin had shown them its secrets, and the forest would continue to live, hidden, powerful, and magical, as long as people like Lucas and Henry remembered its story and protected it from harm. The brothers' adventure had ended, but the lessons, memories, and mysteries of the cabin stayed with them forever. The mountains, the forest, and the hidden cabin had given them a gift they would carry for the rest of their lives.